Employment, Fairness at Work and Enterprise. Summary. This chapter looks at ethnic minority progress at work. It considers the history of and current state of pay and employment, and the trends in social class mobility across generations. The employment rates for white British and Indian ethnic groups were 77% and 76% respectively in 2019. For some others it was significantly lower at 69% for black people, and 56% for people in the combined Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnic group. This last figure is the result of a much lower female participation rate. Unemployment differences have been declining, though remain significantly higher for younger people. The pay gap, meaning the difference between the median hourly earnings of all ethnic minority, not including white minority, groups and white groups, is at its lowest level since 2012 at 2.3%. Employees from the white Irish, Indian and Chinese ethnic groups on average have higher hourly earnings than white British ethnic group. Ethnic minorities have been making progress up the professional and occupational class ladder, though some more than others, and there remains underrepresentation at the very top. Employees from ethnic minority backgrounds are more likely than those from a white British background to say experiencing discrimination contributed to their failure in achieving their career expectations, 20% versus 11%. Using data from previous reviews led by Baroness Ruby McGregor-Smith and Sir John Parker, evidence heard from a wide range of stakeholders and an examination of new data, the Commission identified 4 areas of focus. 1. Ethnicity Pay Gap, evaluating trend in pay and considering the value of ethnicity pay reporting in promoting fair outcomes, using the NHS as a case study. 2. Fairness at Work, challenging existing approaches and examining alternative ways to promote fairness for ethnic minorities that leads to better outcomes and achieves inclusivity. 3. Empowering the next generation of entrepreneurs, stimulating the entrepreneurial instincts of enterprising young people from all backgrounds. 4. Artificial intelligence, considering how to identify and mitigate bias in artificial intelligence, and use it as a tool to promote fairness. The case studies highlighted in this chapter have been identified by the Commission, during its evidence-gathering phase, as positive examples of what works and are used for illustrative purposes only in the context in which they arise. The Commission fully recognises that there will be other examples of similar good practice in the respective fields and industries, so wishes to make clear that in highlighting them, they are not particularly endorsed or being given preferential treatment. Employment and unemployment. The pandemic will have a significant effect on the British economy, causing a big reordering of employment and possibly a return to sustained high levels of unemployment. Some of the data presented below could therefore be overtaken by events. Nevertheless, the pay and employment story has been a broadly positive one in the last quarter of a century. There has been a gradual convergence on the white average in employment, pay and entry into the middle class, with some groups overtaking the white majority, and others somewhat underperforming. In the 1970s, still largely an era of full employment, there was very little disparity between ethnic groups in employment rates. This was at a time when racial hostility was much greater as well as more tolerated than today, underlining the point that equal outcomes do not necessarily signify lack of discrimination, just as differential outcomes are not necessarily caused by discrimination. Employment rates, then, widened sharply in the 1980s and into the 1990s due to the deindustrialization and recessions, but since the early 2000s have been narrowing again. Figure 5. Percentage of working-age people who were employed by ethnicity over time. UK, 1972 to 2020. Audio description of chart. The chart tracks 6 different ethnic groups: white, black Caribbean, black African, Indian, Pakistani/Bangladeshi, Chinese. The percentage of employment goes up the side of the chart, and time is tracked across the bottom from 1970 to 2020. The salient points shown by this chart are as follows. The white line is, generally speaking, of a higher percentage than all the others across time. The other ethnic groups vary wildly up and down. The Pakistani-Bangladeshi line tracks across the bottom of the chart below all other ethnicity groups. The Black African line seems to have the greatest of variances. In general, all the lines track upwards as we move forwards through time, up to 2020. On the last data point, Black Caribbean ethnic group has risen significantly above White British. End of audio description. The gap in employment between the white ethnic group and the Indian, Pakistani and Bangladeshi groups has decreased over the past 20 years. This is mainly due to the fact that these ethnic minority groups started with notably lower employment rates in 2001. For example, the employment rate for Bangladeshi ethnic group increased by 20.6 percentage points from 2001 to 2019, while the rate for white ethnic group increased by 4 percentage points in the same period. Disparities in unemployment rates have been declining quite sharply since 2013. 8% of the Pakistani and Bangladeshi group, 8% of the black group, and 6% of the mixed group were unemployed in 2019, compared with 4% of the white group. The pre-pandemic employment rate for the white British was 77% in 2019. The rate for people from the Indian ethnic group was lower at 76%, while most other minority groups had a lower employment rate, 69% for black people and 56% for people in the combined Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnic group. For white minorities classified as white other, the rate was higher than for the white British group, 83%. The pandemic is likely to have a mixed impact on the employment rate and financial stability of ethnic minority groups. For example, working in sectors shut down by the pandemic and being self-employed is particularly prevalent amongst Pakistani and Bangladeshi men. This brings uncertainty of income in households which also typically have less savings to fall back on. Only 30% of people from the Bangladeshi, Black Caribbean and Black African groups live in households with enough to cover 1 month of income, compared to 60% of the rest of the population. On the other hand, the high representation of other ethnic minority groups in some key worker roles reduces their risk of income losses, at least in the short term. These are only early trends, and changes to employment rates usually lag behind economic shocks. Historically, employment rates of ethnic minority groups have gone down with more than overall employment rates during economic downturns in the UK. This indicates a risk to ethnic minority groups if the economic fallout of COVID-19 crisis fails to turn into a V-shaped recovery. There are substantial differences between men and women in employment rates in the combined Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnic group. 73% compared with 39% respectively in 2019, likely due to the cultural religious reasons. Less marked differences are observed for all other ethnic groups. White British men and women, 80 and 74% respectively, and black men and women, 71% and 67% respectively. Age is another important factor with employment rate differences between the 16 to 24 and 25 to 49 age groups, largest in the Indian ethnic group, 38% and 84%. The smallest in the white British group, 58% and 86%. This difference is likely to be because young people from the Indian ethnic group are also amongst the most likely to go on to further education. Disparities in unemployment rates between ethnic groups are also wider for the 16 to 24 age group. Overall unemployment in 2019 for white people was 4%, and 7% for all minority groups combined. For people aged 16 to 24, unemployment rates are far more pronounced. The white ethnic group has an unemployment rate of 10%, compared with 19% for ethnic minority groups. Black African and Bangladeshi ethnic groups see the highest rates of youth unemployment at 26% and 24% respectively. Figure 6. Unemployment rate by ethnicity and age group. UK 2017 to 2020 combined. Audio description of the graph. 11 ethnicities are listed down the side. The bar graph represents 3 data points for each ethnicity. A group aged 16 to 24, a group aged 25 to 49, a group aged 50 to 65. Some salient features highlighted by the graph. Black Africans aged 16 to 24 have the highest unemployment rate at above 25%. The Bangladeshi ethnic group shows the highest rate of unemployment of people aged 50 to 65, at over 12%. The Chinese ethnic group shows the lowest unemployment rate for people aged 25 to 49. End of audio description. Unemployment rates for the 16 to 24 group are high even for those from Indian and Chinese ethnic groups who comfortably outperform the white average in education and incomes overall, and generally benefit from positive stereotypes. It is noticeable that young people from the Black Caribbean ethnic group, who are more likely to come from families that have been established in the UK for longer, have a much lower unemployment rate than those from the Black African ethnic group, even though prejudice faced by both groups is likely to apply in equal measure. Discrimination is likely to be a part of the story too, an assumption reinforced by field experiments, in which responses are compared to imaginary job applications between people with majority and minority-sounding names. We will look at this later in the Bias at Work and What to Do About It section. Pay, social class and entry to top jobs. The hourly median pay gap between all minorities and the white British ethnic group has shrunk to 2.3%, its smallest level since 2012, when it was 5.1%. This headline figure hides some large variations. The Pakistani ethnic group earns 16% less on average than the white British group, the Bangladeshi ethnic group 15% less, and the Black African group 8% less. Meanwhile, the white Irish 41%, Chinese 23%, and Indian 16% ethnic groups earned more on average than the white British group. In terms of gender, men earned a higher hourly median wage than women in all but 3 ethnic groups in 2019: Arab, Bangladeshi, and Black Caribbean. Black Caribbean and Arab women also earn more on average than white British women. Figure 7. Hourly median pay gap compared with the white British ethnic group by ethnicity, England and Wales, 2019. Pakistani, 15.5%. Mixed white Black African, 15.4%. Bangladeshi, 15.3%. Mixed white Black Caribbean, 12.6%. Other ethnic group, 8.5%. Black African, 7.9%. White other, including Gypsy/Traveller, 7.6%. Other Asian background, 7.5%. Other Black, African, Caribbean, 4.7%. Black Caribbean, 3.7%. Arab, 2.3%. Mixed other, 0.1%. Mixed white Asian, -7%. Indian, -15.5%. Chinese, -23.1%. White Irish, -40.5%. The ethnicity pay gap data only includes those who are employed in the UK, omitting those who are either self-employed or not in work. This is significant, particularly when considering that many ethnic minority groups already have lower employment rates than the white British group. These raw pay numbers also do not take into account things like age, qualifications, region, whether someone was born in the UK or not, and when adjusted, it can reduce the pay gap for some and increase it for others. So, for example, After adjustment, the strongly positive pay gap for UK-born Chinese ethnic groups turns into a small negative one, and for the UK-born Indian group is reduced to a smaller positive pay gap. In other words, although people from the Chinese ethnic group are earning more on average than white British people, they are actually earning less when taking into account of all of these other factors. Figure 8. Hourly median pay gap compared with the white British ethnic group, adjusted for characteristics affecting pay by ethnicity. England and Wales 2019. Audio description of chart. There are 4 data points: unadjusted UK-born, unadjusted non-UK-born, adjusted UK-born, adjusted non-UK-born. Data is presented for 17 ethnic groups. Most salient data for unadjusted UK-born. The following groups have the highest negative value: White Irish, Indian, other ethnic group, Chinese, other Black/African/Caribbean. The following ethnic groups have positive values: Black African, Arab, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, mixed white, Black African, mixed white, Black Caribbean. Salient data points for unadjusted non-UK born. The following ethnic groups have significant negative values: White British, White Irish, Chinese. The following ethnic groups have significant positive values: mixed white/Black Caribbean, mixed white/Black African, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, other Black/African/Caribbean. Data point adjusted UK born. All the values shown in this column are significantly less than the previous 2 columns. The ethnic groups with the highest values are mixed white/Black African, Black African, Asian other. Only 3 ethnic groups are shown with a negative value, and this very small: White Irish, Indian, and mixed white Asian. 4th data point: adjusted non-UK born. Only 2 ethnic groups show negative values. These are White British and White Irish. The ethnic groups with the highest positive value are mixed white/Black Caribbean, Bangladeshi, Asian other Black/African/Caribbean. The overall convergence story on employment and pay is also reflected in a shift up the social scale. Some of this happened almost automatically as the social structure has changed in the past 50 years, eliminating manual working class jobs and creating many more middle class and professional jobs. But some ethnic groups have moved up in the social scale more than others. Over the past 50 years, several ethnic groups have made exceptional progress in the UK. According to work on social mobility by Professor Yao Yun Lee, ethnic minority children with parents in routine manual roles were much more likely to achieve upward mobility compared with their white peers. Only 5% of children from the Chinese ethnic group remain in the same routine manual positions as their parents, compared with 24% of white children. With the exception of men from Black Caribbean and combined Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnic groups, most ethnic groups are now broadly level with the white ethnic group in terms of occupational class. Black Caribbean men arriving in the UK had a lower start in terms of class position, and were well behind white men in occupational advancement or in access to the top occupational classes, including jobs such as teacher, manager, social worker and engineer, for most of the past 50 years. However, according to Lee's work, there are also signs that they are catching up, with second-generation men, those born in the UK or arriving after the age of 13, being little different from white men and second-generation women surpassing white women. Meanwhile, Pakistani Bangladeshi men, along with Black African and Black Caribbean men, were the most vulnerable to unemployment in times of economic downturn, with the chances of getting a position in the top occupational class also declining over the decades for first-generation Pakistani Bangladeshi men. Women in the Pakistani Bangladeshi group also tend to have persistent disadvantages relative to white women in terms of both employment status and class position. 3/4 of the first generation and around half of the second generation women in this group were economically inactive, although the situation has improved in the current decade. In spite of the variations, there have been more signs of social progress than social regress over the past 50 years, with some groups, like those from the Indian and Chinese ethnic groups, doing even better than those from white ethnic groups, and other groups catching up. What about the extent to which ethnic minorities advance into the very top positions in the professional, business and public life? The executive recruitment agency, Green Park's Colour of Power project, has recently found that 52 out of 1,099 of the most powerful jobs were held by ethnic minority individuals. That is 4.7%. It concluded that Britain's leadership positions had failed to improve between 2017 and 2020, with only 15 additional ethnic minority-held roles since 2017. When looking at the top of the FTSE 100, we see that there has been an improvement in the representation of ethnic minorities on board just in this last year. In January 2020, 52 FTSE 100 companies had ethnic representation on their boards, and in November 2020, this figure rose to 74. However, at the same time, the number of black people at the very top of the FTSE 100 companies, meaning chair, chief executive, or chief financial officer, recently fell from 2 to 0, reported in February 2021. Overall, some sectors of the UK are more open than others. The top of business and academia remain notably white, while the public sector in general has a better track record than the private. Now we take a closer look at the share of ethnic minorities in the upper echelons of the three professions: the civil service, law, and medicine. Civil service. As of 2020, 9.1% of senior civil servants came from ethnic minority background, which has increased from around 4% in 2010. There is substantial variation across government departments. In 2019, the department with the highest levels of ethnic diversity is the Department for Health and Social Care, where 12.8% of senior civil servants came from an ethnic minority background. In contrast, only 2.2% of senior civil servants at the Ministry of Defence came from an ethnic minority background. Figure 9. Percentage of civil servants who were from ethnic minority groups, not including white minorities, by government department and grade. Audio description of chart. 2 data points are given: a percentage for all grades and a percentage for senior civil service. 17 government departments are listed. All values given are an estimate based on this bar chart. Department of Health and Social Care. All grades, 24%. Senior Civil Service, 12%. Department for International Trade. All grades, 24%. Senior Civil Service, 12%. Home Office. All grades, 23%. Senior Civil Service, 9%. HM Treasury. All grades, 19%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Department for Education. All grades, 18%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Cabinet Office. All grades, 18%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. All grades, 17%. Senior Civil Service, 10%. Department for International Development. All grades, 15%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Foreign and Commonwealth Office. All grades, 14%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. All grades, 14%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Ministry of Justice. All grades, 13%. Senior Civil Service, 4%. Department for Work and Pensions, all grades, 14%. Senior Civil Service, 4%. HM Revenue and Customs, all grades, 12%. Senior Civil Service, 9%. Department for Environment and Food and Rural Affairs, all grades, 8%. Senior Civil Service, 7%. Department for Transport, all grades, 7%. Senior Civil Service, 4%. Ministry of Defence, all grades, 6%. Senior Civil Service, 4%. Scottish Government, all grades, 3%. Senior Civil Service, 2%. The Civil Service Fast Stream is Civil Service's talent spotting program for its future leadership. The most recent data shows that in 2018, over 12,000 applications were received from ethnic minority applicants, 31.2% of those where ethnicity was known. Of people recommended for appointment, 15.8% were from an ethnic minority background. Both these figures have been increasing steadily since the late 1990s. The Civil Service has a series of ethnic minority targets for appointments to the senior service. Its current target is to have about 9.5% of appointments to the Civil Service from an ethnic minority background, rising to 13.2% in 2022-25. It is currently falling short of these. Indeed, they may be unrealistic targets given the minority shape of the talent pool that entered the Civil Service at the turn of the century. Law. As of 2019, 21% of lawyers working in law firms in England and Wales were from an ethnic minority background. 15% of lawyers are Asian, up 6 percentage points since 2014, compared with 7% of the workforce in England, Scotland and Wales in 2018. 3% of lawyers are black, no change since 2017, and this reflects the workforce in England, Scotland and Wales in 2018, 3%. There has been no change in the percentage of lawyers from the mixed, 2%, or other, 1%, ethnic groups. Ethnic minority partners tend to be clustered more in sole-owner law firms, as well as smaller firms. The largest firms, 50 or more partners, have the lowest percentage of ethnic minority partners, 8%. In contrast, 36% of one-partner firms have a partner from an ethnic minority background. The most elite law firms, known as the Magic Circle, are including Freshfields, Allen and Overy, Slaughter and May, Clifford Chance and Linklaters, show some variation in their diversity levels at partner level. For instance, 6% of partners at Slaughter and May are of ethnic minority background, compared with 10% at Linklaters as of 2018-19. These firms are mostly more diverse at associate level than at the national average. Around 18 to 26% of Magic Circle associates are from an ethnic minority compared with 15% of associates from all law firms. The exception was Freshfields at 13%. Among barristers, levels of ethnic diversity are broadly similar to solicitors. Overall, 14.6% of practicing barristers come from an ethnic minority background. At QC level, 8.8% are from ethnic minority backgrounds, with 90.7%. Finally, the ethnic diversity of pupil barristers is higher, with 22.9% of them coming from an ethnic minority background. Judges from ethnic minority backgrounds are still relatively rare, but with this growing pipeline are expected to become more common. Medicine. Medicine is a profession where ethnic minority groups are strongly represented. In 2020, almost half, 46.1%, of doctors working in the NHS were from an ethnic minority background, with 30.2% from the Asian ethnic group, 5.2% from the Black ethnic group, and 3.5% from the mixed ethnic group, and 2.6% from the Chinese ethnic group. Senior doctors, including consultants and specialty doctors, were overall more likely to be white, 56.2%, or Asian, 31.4%, than junior doctors, including specialty registrars and foundation year doctors, 50.5% and 29.3%. And likewise, a higher percentage of junior doctors were from Black, Chinese, mixed or other ethnic backgrounds, compared with senior doctors. However, representation varies between these grades. Overall, around 40% of consultants are from ethnic minority backgrounds, as is a similar share of Foundation Year 1 doctors. Figure 10. Percentage of doctors who were from each ethnic group by grade. Audio description of stacked bar chart. The stacked chart displays 5 factors: all grades, consultant, specialty doctor, specialty registrar, Foundation Doctor Year 1. The following are salient facts visible on the bar chart. The white ethnic group dominates the consultant and Foundation Doctor Year 1 sections. The Asian ethnic group dominates the specialty doctor group. The smallest percentage of any grade is that held by the Chinese ethnic group within specialty doctor grades. End of audio description. Ethnicity Pay Gap Reporting. An ethnicity pay gap is calculated as the difference between the median hourly earnings of the reference group, white or white British, and other ethnic groups as a proportion of median hourly earnings of the reference group. For this reason, pay gaps, on whatever grounds, do not necessarily represent unequal pay for equal work, but can describe the structure of an organisation and how different ethnic groups are distributed across its pay bands. Ethnicity pay gap reporting is a potentially useful tool, but needs to be approached with care. Reported ethnicity pay data should be disaggregated by different ethnicities to provide the best information possible. The pay gaps, once identified, should be reviewed to gain an understanding of why they exist in different organisations. Discussions with businesses have revealed that, like the Commission, they are aware of the pitfalls around the execution of ethnicity pay reporting, but feel that this work needs to start somewhere. We specifically consider the NHS as a case study later in this section, reviewing disparities in pay amongst ethnic minority healthcare staff, as well as disparities in recruitment and progression. We recognise the appetite that some employers have to act and publish their ethnicity pay gaps. A number of private and public sector employers, such as the NHS, have already voluntarily published their ethnicity pay gaps. We believe that ethnicity pay gaps should continue to be reported on a voluntary basis, and that the government should provide guidance to employers who choose to do so. It is clear that pay gap reporting, as it is currently devised for gender, cannot be applied to ethnicity. There are significant statistical and data issues that would arise as a result of substituting a binary protected characteristic, male or female, with a characteristic that has multiple categories. The main statistical problem that arises with ethnicity pay gap reporting is the unreliability of sample sizes. If an employer with 250 employees, the threshold suggested in the 2018 BEIS consultation on ethnic pay gap reporting, reports a gender pay gap, on average they will be comparing 125 men with 125 women. If they report an ethnicity pay gap as well, on average, they will be comparing 225 white employees with 25 ethnic minority employees. Any findings from such a comparison will be unreliable and make it impossible to look at the workforce stratified by the 18 ONS ethnicity classifications. If an employer is in an area with a low ethnic minority population, there may not be a diverse local candidate pool for firms to employ from. The 2011 census data shows that of the 650 constituencies in the UK, 437 are over 90% white. So many employers around the country simply do not have enough ethnic minorities for the recording sample to be valid. For example, any employer in the Lake District can expect 98% of its candidate pool to be white. An employer there with 300 staff could then expect to have an average of just 6 ethnic minority employees. Any comparison between the median of 294 employees with the median of 6 employees will be meaningless, and is likely to change considerably just from adding or subtracting one ethnic minority employee. Additionally, the age distribution of ethnic minority groups can influence the ethnicity pay gap. Those from ethnic minority groups are more likely to be younger, meaning they have not yet had the opportunity to reach the peak of their careers. In order to account for this, firms would have to control for age, which makes sample sizes smaller and the reported data subject to fluctuations year on year. Recommendation 9. Promote fairness. Investigate what causes existing ethnic pay disparities. The Commission recommends that all employers that choose to publish their ethnicity pay figures should also publish a diagnosis and action plan to lay out the reasons for and the strategy to improve any disparities. Reported ethnicity pay data should also be disaggregated by different ethnicities to provide the best information possible to facilitate change. Account should also be taken of small sample sizes in particular regions and smaller organisations. To support employers undertaking this exercise, the Commission recommends that the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, is tasked with producing guidance for employers to draw on. Nhs Pay, Recruitment and Progression. In 2018, the NHS became one of the first public sector organisations to publish breakdowns of pay for all staff by ethnic group, but the picture represented by the overall NHS data is complicated. For instance, in 2019, the average monthly pay of full-time equivalent Asian men overall was £3,864 greater than that of white men, £3,145, who in turn earned more than black men, £2,646. Similarly, Asian women, 2,717, earned more than white women, 2,491, which in turn earned more than black women, 2,320. There is a disparity here, but more information is required to understand why and where this disparity exists. The high number of Asian groups at consultant level in the NHS is likely to explain some of this difference. Generally, there is no consistent pattern with examples of both positive and negative pay gaps, as well as examples of parity. One of the stand-out figures is that black male senior managers earn just 83p for every £1 earned by their white counterparts, while Asian men senior managers earn £1.01. This might have something to do with the seniority levels within this category. At the very senior manager grade, black men earn 97p for every £1 earned by white men, while Asian men earn £1.04. The corresponding figures for women are 99p and £1.06, respectively. Such a picture is not consistent with the pattern one might expect of systemic discrimination, although undoubtedly there will be cases of discrimination and bias in what is the largest employer in the country. The weight of the evidence considered tends to point towards the white group receiving marginally more pay within staff groups. An analysis of pay by ethnicity controlling for age would provide further insight into pay differences. Case Study: The Surash-Pierce Report on Ethnic Pay Gap. This report, published in September 2020, presents a comprehensive review into ethnic pay gap and workforce development at the Newcastle-upon-Tyne Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust. The report used the following data during its review: electronic staff records, WRES data for 2018-19, NHS National Staff Survey, recruitment data from TRAC Recruitment Management System, local and national Clinical Excellence Awards data. By combining these varied datasets, the review was able to build a more in-depth understanding of differences in the pay, progression, and experiences of the Trust's ethnic minority staff. Some of the key headline findings include: BME staff are more likely to pursue continuous professional development and non-mandatory training. BME staff at Newcastle hospitals report being more likely than white staff to be bullied or harassed by other members of staff, with less opportunity to progress in their careers but more discrimination from managers. White staff report experienced more abuse from service users compared with BME staff at Newcastle hospitals. A white applicant to a consultant job in Newcastle is more likely to be shortlisted and more likely to be successful at interview. Relative likelihood 1.53 times. Additional programmed activities, PA, pavements, female consultants lag behind male consultants. Clinical Excellence Award, CEA. Locally, a BME consultant makes 24.5% less than a white consultant, compared with national awards, which is only 5.4% less. More female BME consultants applied for the local CEA 2017-2018 and were more likely to be awarded CEAs. However, the value of their award was the lowest level. Impact. Newcastle hospitals believe they are the first trust in the country to publish such detailed, transparent, and extensive information about this issue. Some of the information in this report makes difficult and uncomfortable reading, but the Trust has reflected on it and is using the report to learn from and as a basis for improvement. Newcastle hospitals have used the information to inspire positive dialogue and taken action to address the race inequality in the workforce. Case study. Occupational Preferences research. During the Commission's investigations of this topic, an exploratory piece of research was commissioned to try and understand possible reasons behind the occupational preferences of NHS staff, and if there were any differences by ethnicity. The study had a small sample size, about 116, along with an uneven distribution for gender, white and ethnic minority groups, and full and part-time employees. As a result, findings should be regarded as indicative only. However, this is an example of the kind of work that could be done by trusts or the NHS as a whole to consider the causes of any career progression gap between different groups of employees. The study explored factors influencing behaviours in the attainment of managerial and leadership roles across the ethnic groups, that is, white and ethnic minority populations in the NHS. As the authors stated, the objective of the study was to offer preliminary findings on whether there is a significant difference in behaviours of ethnic groups that explains variance in attaining managerial and leadership roles. The study found that a much higher proportion of respondents from Black and Asian groups perceived becoming a manager or leader to be a risky career choice. It also found that a higher number of Black respondents disagree that their manager and others more senior provide them with feedback to become a manager, in comparison with white respondents. This merits better understanding, as there are simple HR activities which can address these perceptions. The research also suggested across all ethnic groups there was a link between the level of educational attainment of respondents' parents and respondents' career progression, therefore suggesting that social-economic background is a factor meriting further investigation where racial disparities arise. As noted previously, the pay gaps once identified should be reviewed to gain an understanding of why they exist in different organisations. There are several ways in which this could be done. An example of this is demonstrated through the case study above of an exploratory piece of research conducted of NHS staff. Recommendation 10. Promote fairness. Improve understanding of the ethnicity pay gap in NHS England. The Commission recommends that NHS England as a whole should commission a strategic review of the causes of disparate pay, and, where discrimination is pinpointed, spell out the measures that might meaningfully address it. Such a review would shine a light on the barriers to in-work progression and how to overcome them. For example, in promotion, are foreign qualifications equally validated yet informally seen as inferior? It would ask how the NHS performs on pay gaps compared with international comparators, and if other metrics than pay gaps reveal barriers better. Bias at work, and what to do about it. Bias and discrimination at work are usually hard to pin down, especially when they're not only a social taboo but also illegal. The field experiments using job applicants tests, mentioned below, provide conclusive evidence that bias, at least in hiring, does exist. They also highlight the need for more scrutiny of the interventions that do make a difference. Job application field experiments have been carried out in the UK since the late 1960s. The most recent was conducted by Dr. Valentina Di Stasio and Professor Anthony Harth as part of a wider EU-funded project, and found a callback ratio of 1.6 to 1. In other words, to receive a callback, people with ethnic minority names had to write 1.6 letters for every one written by someone with a majority name. A less recent study focused on UK cities was conducted by NatSen on behalf of the Department of Work and Pensions. This study found a similar callback ratio of 1.7 to 1, with ratios varying between ethnic minority groups from 1.5 to 1 to 1.9 to 1. Figure 11. Response rates to job inquiries, callback ratios, compared with the white ethnic group by ethnicity. DWP 2009. Audio description of chart. The bar chart shows the callback ratios for 6 ethnic groups. White and Pakistani/Bangladeshi, 1.48. White and Indian, 1.91. White and Chinese, 1.86. White and Black Caribbean, 1.86. White and Black African, 1.65. Ethnic minorities, 1.74. End of audio description. There are important caveats. We know that discrimination occurs, but these experiments cannot be relied upon to provide clarity on the extent that it happens in everyday life. While these application tests show discrimination against names that are recognised as not being traditionally British, it is unclear if this effect is about race, class, or perceived foreign culture. More granular studies should be conducted which manipulate first names as well as surnames, class as well as ethnicity, and which include greater and lesser values of CV qualifications, as all have been found to affect results. They should also attempt to assess the ethnic makeup of those making hiring decisions, or at least the ethnic composition of the hiring organisation or unit, to test for variations in bias amongst assessors. Field experiments are, of course, not the only possible evidence for discrimination. Varying promotion rates may also signify discrimination, with more ethnic minority employees overall saying that experienced discrimination contributed to them failing to achieve their career expectations than those from white British backgrounds, 20% as compared to 11%. Black employees had a higher rate of experiencing discrimination at 29%, but this was still not the experience of the majority. Subjective factors may also affect perceptions of discrimination. Human beings tend to discriminate even when unintended. We are all susceptible to differentiating between in-groups and out-groups, and will be prone to favour those we perceive as belonging. The Commission recognises that some organisations have already adopted initiatives that produce fairer recruitment, for example through name-blind applications and diverse interview panels. For example, Baker McKenzie, the international law firm, uses a combined approach of blind screening and the Contextual Recruitment System, CRS, developed by Rare Recruitment. See the case study below. Evidence submitted from the Employer Lawyers Association, ELA, to the Commission's call for evidence further highlighted that many firms have adopted Rare Recruitment's Contextual Recruitment System in recruiting candidates from diverse backgrounds. This initiative was considered important in helping the legal profession, in particular, to reduce the evidenced racial inequalities that exist when recruiting young people. Case study. Rare Recruitment's Contextual Recruitment System. Research shows high-achieving people from disadvantaged backgrounds outperform their peers in elite jobs. Rare's pioneering Contextual Recruitment System provides real-time contextual information that allows organisations to identify exceptional candidates they might otherwise miss. The system uses big data to help organisations identify candidates with the greatest potential. It measures candidates' achievements, including academic performance at university, against uniquely comprehensive datasets and classification systems developed by RARE over a decade. The system works by combining publicly available information with candidates' application responses. RARE uses information from their bespoke databases. For example, in the UK, the first database contains the exam results of more than 4,000 secondary schools and sixth form colleges nationally, while the second contains 2.5 million residential postcodes. The system delivers two outputs to employers: flags to measure disadvantage, and performance index (PI) to measure outperformance against students at the same school. RARE reports that firms adopting their CRS hire 61% more people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Unconscious bias is a form of fast thinking, those quick decisions we make without realizing and are no doubt connected to a particular value or worldview that are hardwired into our minds. Such bias is commonplace because it is reflexive and automatic. It is also laced with preferences and prejudices based on our upbringing and family and social backgrounds. All people, not just white people, are subject to these biases, but it matters more if you are 84% of the population and tend to dominate the top positions. There is a perception that people at the top end to have affinity bias, appointing people in their own image. Polling by Harvey Nash's Engage network of senior executive and board leaders from ethnic minority backgrounds found that 63% believed that the unconscious biases of boards and CEOs is a factor in explaining why there is so little diversity at board level. Indeed, FTSE 100 CEOs do have a certain profile. They are nearly all white, male, university graduates, and a quarter have MBAs. 18% have studied at Oxford or Cambridge, and almost half of them have been promoted from inside the same company, 46% in 2019. If ambitious minority people do not fit the mental image of what leadership looks like, they fear they will be overlooked. For those who come from a different background or have a different set of experiences, the implicit culture or feel of professional life can seem strange, especially for those from a minority or working class background. Research by the Equality and Human Rights Commission found that for FTSE 350 leadership role descriptions provided by 25 companies, 28% explicitly specified some form of cultural fit or chemistry. Youth Futures Foundation and research from Nhs Social Research illustrate how these requirements can further disadvantage those from underrepresented backgrounds. Quote, "Such information gaps can grow even larger if the young people from more affluent backgrounds have a better understanding of the demands of a job application process, as well as a greater appreciation of the relevant cultural norms, which can be particularly beneficial in interviews and assessment centres." End quote. Youth Futures Foundation's call for evidence. Quote, "Young people across ethnic groups were aware that they may lack the cultural capital that high-skilled employers may value. In turn, they suspected that prospective employers may make conscious or unconscious judgments based on the way graduates from working-class backgrounds dress and present themselves, as well as their vocabulary, accent, and ability to articulate themselves in an interview." End quote. Nhs Social Research. Many companies have been promoted into intense soul-searching with regard to race, prompted by the Black Lives Matter movement last year. They have adopted various diversity and inclusion indexes, tick-box exercises, and charters, such as unconscious bias training. The result, however, seems to be a focus on process rather than outcomes. This training scheme, that equality initiative, a newly designed culturally neutral form. Most researchers remain skeptical about the impact of unconscious bias training, quotas, and diversity specialists. Research by Kalav and Dobbin, published in the Harvard Business Review, found that mandatory diversity and inclusion measures have not always been successful. Many of the products of the diversity and inclusion industry are not standardized or certified by an official body, or independently assessed to show any level of efficacy. And some of the most popular products, such as unconscious bias training, has been shown to have unclear or mixed impact. Indeed, research by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation found that sometimes probation staff feel reluctant to speak freely for fear their words coming across as racist, limiting opportunity for further discussions. The Equality and Human Rights Commission found that evidence for unconscious bias training's ability to effectively change behaviour is limited, and there is potential for backfiring effects when UBT participants are exposed to information that suggests stereotypes and biases are unchangeable. While the Commission recognises the place of such practices in the journey to promote diverse and inclusive work environments, it maintains that diversity and eliminating disparity requires impactful organisational redesign and training that leads to truly inclusive environments. By inclusive, this means an environment where anyone feels comfortable to be themselves and confident that they have the same chance of succeeding as anyone else with the same qualifications and experience. Diversity training and policies that treat people differently according to ethnicity does not work. We all have a responsibility to reduce bias, and there must be some tolerance for human fallibility. As Musa Al-Ghabi makes clear in his article, diversity is important. Diversity-related training is terrible. Diversity-related training should be a process of mutual exploration, in which bias, discrimination, nepotism, and motivated reasoning should be seen as general cognitive tendencies, which people of all backgrounds and ethnicities are susceptible to. This includes nudge-style procedures, such as name-blind CVs, transparent performance metrics, family-friendly policies, proactive mentoring and networking procedures, and are more useful than methods that overtly discriminate against some groups, for example, quotas. The Commission recognises that employers will want to do something to show a commitment to fairness. However, finding one ethnic minority face for a board, for example, is not a substitute for a proper fairness strategy. It should not be assumed that someone's ethnic background will change a board's culture, nor that when people from different backgrounds come together they will be more creative. Greater emphasis should be placed on diversity of thought and perspective around a board table, which is not associated with anyone's race or ethnicity. Widening the pool of places where positions are advertised or people recruited could attract more diverse candidates in every sense of the word, without discriminating against any group. Organisations can be redesigned to change behaviour, and therefore outcomes. Sometimes the changes are so simple that they seem trite. For example, using images of successful colleagues with an ethnic minority background on walls. But these nudge measures and a better understanding of how selection for top jobs operate have been proven to produce more of the best results and beneficial outcomes without alienating people. One example of increasing representation through the use of nudge measures, such as mentoring, is Liverpool City Council's initiative Step Forward, Step Up. The programme, due to be launched in September 2021, will be delivered by a consortium of key city employees, led by the Lord Mayor of Liverpool. Through a series of development modules, such as leadership development programmes, mentoring and action learning sets, it will seek to develop and create a diverse talent pipeline for Liverpool. Participating employers support the module by sponsoring participants' fees, promoting career opportunities, contributing to modules, providing mentoring and committing to embedding diversity at all levels, amongst other things. This programme was developed in partnership with the successful model created by Bristol City Council's Stepping Up initiative, a local-driven public-private collaboration to advance representation. From the evidence it received, the Commission identified a promising inclusion tool by Zyner Search, developed by In Diverse Company, that provides an alternative way for businesses to measure inclusion based on behavioural psychology and research. The bespoke model, called the Cultural Inclusion Maturity Model, CIMM, is focused on driving consistent and meaningful behavioural changes in a measurable way, and tailored to meet respective business needs. In Diverse Companies work with private and public sector firms has revealed that despite an increased ethnic diversity at the board level, other employees in the organisation still face marginalisation. Shifting cultures takes a more sustained effort than increasing representation. Both, however, are critically important and are likely to feed into each other. The Commission has seen preliminary evidence of SIM's novel approach, yielding positive results, for example within a leading pharmaceutical company and also a recruitment company that an InDiverse company have partnered with. Case study: Cultural Inclusion Maturity Model. The Culture Inclusion Maturity Model was developed with a mission to create a dynamic system of inclusion measurement that enables organisations to recognise, to track and to monitor progress in establishing an inclusive workspace on a global scale. The constructs of the model are underpinned by psychological and business research. The unique methodology measures inclusion by assessing the behaviours of leaders, teams, and employees, and auditing the organisation's capability, defined by policies, processes, and procedures. The model not only provides a specific measure for an organisation which can be compared with others, it also clearly defines where the measure is in terms of maturity level, and as such enables organisations to see how they can make improvements. At the end of the process, organisations receive an inclusion accreditation, either bronze, silver, or gold, a comprehensive breakdown of findings, highlighting areas of the organisation that are more or less inclusive than others, a list of recommended actions tailored to the organisation, specifically designed to increase overall inclusion and employee well-being. The model has been tested for validity and reliability in the UK, Europe, Asia, and the US, and across a range of sectors to ensure the measure is robust. Progress is measured by running the CIMM on a regular basis, every 12 to 18 months, with key outcomes for organisation including improved well-being. Inclusive work cultures provide a safer place for employees to perform at their best. Transparency. Inclusive cultures drive transparency and reduce instances of corporate wrongdoing and corruption, build trust between employees and managers, and create reputable brands. Business performance. Inclusive cultures drive better decisions, productivity, innovation, creativity, leading to better business performance. Diversity. Inclusive cultures, ones where all employees feel they belong and can also be open about their differences, are one that not only attract diverse talent, but also they get the most from diversity of perspective. Impact. There is early evidence to show that additional organisational benefits, such as a reduced number of grievance and disciplinary actions, reduction in sickness levels, and increases in staff engagement and customer satisfaction. The Commission also recognises the important role of public sector procurement and supporting in-work progression. It welcomes the publication of the Government's Transforming Public Procurement Green Paper, and supports the work of the In-Work Progression Commission led by Baroness McGregor-Smith. Recommendation 8. Promote fairness, advance fairness in the workplace. 1A. The Commission calls on organisations to now move away from funding unconscious bias training. Existing training should be replaced with new interventions that, when implemented, can be measured or evaluated for their efficacy, such as mandated sponsorship groups, to ensure wider exposure of ethnic minority individuals to their peers, managers, and other decision-makers. Training and routine skill supports for all employees in their professional and personal lives. For example, on collaboration, confidence, communication, and presentation skills, which could disproportionately benefit the more disadvantaged groups. 1B. The Commission also calls on the Government to work with a panel of academics and practitioners to develop resources and evidence-based approaches of what does work to advance fairness in the workplace. The landscape of diversity training is highly mixed, and the Government can play a role in guiding organisations to high-quality materials and resources. These resources should include guidance for employers and be piloted in the civil service to replace the use of unconscious bias training. Nhs Staff Experience. The NHS is a success story, with significant overrepresentation of ethnic minorities in high-status professional roles, but also a less happy story, with a consistently negative experience reported by many of its ethnic minority staff at lower levels. The Commission heard from frontline staff who felt that there were still informal progression or recruitment practices that could be slowing the reduction of disparities. The Commission heard that, quote, for exec and non-exec roles, having transparency in the application process is vital. We have examples of conversations and pats on the back to get appointments to the board. End quote. This was raised as a particular issue when moving into management. Quote, at junior stage I didn't feel discrimination, but getting forward into the other roles it becomes difficult. It goes back to these networks and the average black person doesn't have. End quote. The processes are challenging to nail down and then to police, given their informal nature, but more broadly, the NHS recognises that there are problematic disparities which impact the experience, well-being and health outcomes of staff themselves, as well as their career progression and the performance of the trusts in which they work. Ethnic minority staff report worse experiences when compared with white staff. The Commission heard examples of the kinds of negative experiences faced by some on the front line. Quote, the issues came when I was actually qualified. I would go on to wards and not be recognised as a nurse. People would even ring agencies to confirm if I was an actual nurse. End quote. The NHS's Work Race Equity Standards, WRES, is a series of indicators chosen to measure equality within the NHS. Evidence from WRES shows ethnic minority NHS staff are more likely to report personally experiencing discrimination at work from a colleague, 15.3% of people who were not white, compared with 6.4% of white workers. They are also more likely to report harassment, bullying or abuse, 29% compared with 24.2%, and less likely to believe that there were equal opportunities for career progression or promotion, 69.9% compared with 86.3%. In terms of actual opportunities, WRES shows white applicants were 1.46 times more likely to be appointed from shortlisting across all posts compared to ethnic minority applicants, while BME staff were more likely to be formally disciplined by a factor of 1.22. It should be noted that the surveys from which this data is taken have a low response rate for ethnic minorities, 16.7%. WRES indicators are limited to white staff versus BME staff, and so they do not tell the full story as to where the actual disparities lie. The Commission accepts the work of WRES as important to monitor fairness within the NHS, but suggests that further detail is required. This includes disaggregating within the BME category, as well as looking at opportunities in more detail, most notably in terms of disparity within staff groups. In an effort to establish how NHS organisations can address workforce inequalities, the King's Fund looked at case study examples of where interventions, such as establishing staff networks, ensuring safe routes for raising concerns, and enabling staff development and career progression were being implemented. It was found that these were broadly perceived to be beneficial, but also recognised that there is no single one-size-fits-all approach that can work. The Care Quality Commission, CQC, takes a range of diversity indicators, including WRES scores and recruitment data, into account when running its inspections, as well as engagement with bodies or groups within healthcare providers to gain qualitative understanding of such issues. However, the Commission has heard about a lack of trust in the CQC process amongst frontline staff. As one paramedic stated, quote, the CQC has made it clear they ignore race issues. End quote. The Commission heard feedback that more needs to be done by the CQC to ensure disparities are better understood and considered in inspections. The results from this have the potential to be one of the strongest tools for encouraging change and progress, and for one of the largest employers in the UK. Recommendation 2. Build trust. Review the Care Quality Commission (CQC's) inspection process. The Commission recommends that the Department of Health and Social Care (DHSC) commission a review into the CQC's approach to scoring employee diversity and inclusion in their inspections. The Commission recommends that this review is chaired by an expert with close knowledge of the healthcare system and CQC internal processes, ideally a former inspector or inspector of an alternative inspection body. The review team should work closely with the NHS Workforce Race Equality Standards team and the disciplinary bodies of the medical professions to ensure that the views of these bodies feed into this work. Enterprise. The UK continues to rank as one of the world's most entrepreneurial countries. Enterprise is a crucial engine of economic growth, and the entrepreneurial path should be accessible to all. It has some of the lowest barriers to entry, yet potential entrepreneurs' experiences are influenced by their ethnicity, gender, age, and geographic location. There is clearly an appetite for those from ethnic minority backgrounds to pursue enterprise, and benefits to the rest of society when they do. In 2018, around 250,000 firms in the UK were ethnic minority-led, and generated around £25 billion of growth value added (GVA), the equivalent of the city of Manchester. Additionally, ethnic minority-owned firms were more likely to export their goods and services than white-owned firms in all regions across the UK, bringing vital income to the UK economy. The Commission believes in the power of agency. The need to stimulate the entrepreneurial instincts of the country's people is greater than ever. Whilst this is the case, we know that more support for ethnic minority entrepreneurs and those from lower socio-economic backgrounds is needed. The data shows the following. Those from Asian and other ethnic minority backgrounds are less able to get access to finance to start working on their idea. 49% of Asian and other ethnic minorities previously aspiring entrepreneurs cited difficulties getting finance as a reason they stopped working on the idea, compared with 25% of white British people. We explore some of the reasons to this later. Despite those from black backgrounds having similar success rates to their white counterparts in starting a business, they also see worse outcomes. This is thought to be the result of their location and lower household income levels. 40% of ethnic minority people in the UK live in London, which faces higher costs as well as higher competition. In terms of performance, black business owners report a median turnover of £25,000. This is £10,000 less than white business owners, and £15,000 less than Asian and other ethnic minority business owners. In 2019, 72% of black and 62% of Asian and other ethnic minority business owners report making a profit, compared with 84% of white business owners. For female business owners, over one-third of those from black, Asian, and other ethnic minority backgrounds reported making no profit in 2019, compared with 15% of white female business owners. Overall median turnover for female entrepreneurs' businesses was a third of male entrepreneurs, and productivity was less than half. Those who afforded more and better opportunities to build social capital, for example through their jobs, have higher success in comparison to those with less opportunity, for example those previously looking after the home. However, there is an underrepresentation of black people in managerial and senior roles, thereby reducing the opportunities to develop relevant social capital. Ethnic minority entrepreneurs also experience poorer outcomes in accessing venture capital than their white counterparts. Black entrepreneurs were cited as experiencing the poorest outcomes of all, with only 38 black entrepreneurs in a sample of 3,784 receiving venture capital funding in the past 10 years. 40% of the total capital invested at seed stage between 2009 and 2019 went to funding teams with at least one member from a top-ranking university. This indicates that those who receive higher education from such institutions disproportionately benefit from receiving starting capital towards their venture. The Commission found there to be a fundamental barrier in communication between ethnic minority groups and high street banks. Many aren't engaging and feel discouraged in seeking finance due to fear of rejection. There is evidence to show that business owners from ethnic minority backgrounds are disproportionately declined for lending. And while there is no evidence of racial discrimination by banks, this has resulted in perceptions of a systematic disadvantage underpinning discouragement. When giving evidence to the Commission, Jamaican-born entrepreneur Levi Roots recalled his own experience as a young entrepreneur in Brixton during the 1980s. He was repeatedly declined for investment and felt dissatisfied with the advice he received from his local bank. Roots believed that the support and opportunities available to him as an aspiring entrepreneur were limited in comparison to those in more affluent areas of Herne Hill nearby. While some found financing to support their business ideas through avenues such as the government-backed Startup Loan Scheme, many others are reluctant to borrow from banks, preferring to finance their business ideas through considered safer means, such as personal savings or support from friends and family. However, the limited personal resources of those from lower socio-economic backgrounds consequently hinders their development of their ideas. There is work here for high street banks and lending institutions in making themselves more accessible to these community groups, who currently do not consider lending to be a viable access route for them. The Commission considered ways in which it is better to connect the industry with disproportionately affected groups from ethnic minority and lower socio-economic backgrounds, and wider access for them. Banks are already asking this question and conducting research, but we have seen few action-based solutions. More than ever, the younger generation have the desire to be their own boss, but of all age groups are unlikely to act on this ambition. They are alive to the latest technologies, trends and ideas, but are unfortunately among those hardest hit by the economic downturn of the COVID-19 pandemic. For many, starting a business poses too big a risk when compared to the stability of a more traditional form of employment. The Commission heard from many young people who shared their ambitions and voiced their frustrations regarding perceived barriers. Many among them felt strongly that there was a need to mitigate against the regional inequalities of labour market opportunities available to them. It is for this reason that the Commission chose to focus on providing increased opportunities to young people. We recognise the benefit of having targeted interventions to support them, particularly those facing worse outcomes as a result of demographic factors. We believe enterprise is a crucial way to raise individual agency and also contribute to the country's economic recovery. Universities have been known to be regional engines of innovation. They contain a copious amount of untapped potential and present the ideal infrastructure and resources to generate ideas, activities, and meet those like-minded. Yet relatively few university graduates go on to become entrepreneurs. The Commission felt that there was much fertile ground in better utilising the role they can play in nurturing entrepreneurial spirit. As it stands, opportunities across universities are being missed, with a disproportionate amount of capital at seed stage invested in those from the UK's elite and Tier 1 educational institutions at seed stage. Yet several universities across the UK have been recognised for the support they provide to aspiring entrepreneurs. These institutions reside in areas with large ethnic minority populations, serve their local populations, and support their local economies, yet face limitations from the low endowments provided to them, in comparison to those more research-focused and internationally facing. Generating investment into them could further aid in their ability to provide talented students with early opportunities to build companies and grow talent within their regions. Financial institutions are in a position to offer the required resource and should be encouraged to do so. During our evidence session with HSBC UK, we found there to be much goodwill and a desire to support underrepresented communities to bridge the gap of enterprise ambition with reality. There was an awareness of the disparities these groups faced and agreement that institutions who were committed and working hard to support underrepresented groups through their journey should benefit from additional support in doing so. After all, entrepreneurial success requires rounded support. This means financial investment accompanied by business support services such as mentoring, capacity building, and network access. Together with HSBC UK, the Commission developed a proposal which aimed to encourage the entrepreneurial ambitions and innovation of the next generation through the spirit of competition. Competition is a key engine of innovation, and we have seen cases of this time and again. Take Dragon's Den, for example. There are many individuals across the UK from all backgrounds who, with some financial investment and support, have the opportunity to become a household name like Levi Roots. Since its inception in 2014, HSBC UK's SME Lending Fund has supplied over £75 billion to boost British business growth. As a part of their renewed commitment in 2021 to lend a further £15 billion to SMEs through this fund, the Commission felt it was important that young people were given the opportunity to contribute to the country's economic recovery through this fund. Recommendation 17. Create agency. Encourage innovation. The Commission recommends that HSBC UK works in collaboration with universities across the UK to pilot a competitive enterprise programme that will target aspiring entrepreneurs from underrepresented and low-income backgrounds. The universities that would be considered to take part in the pilot would be those who would benefit most from an increased endowment that would 1. Bolster their offer of support to aspiring entrepreneurs and 2. Further enable them to nurture entrepreneurial talent. The programme will support participants in the development of their proposals through the provision of advice, mentorship and access to networks, and provide financial backing towards the winning entrants' enterprise. The Commission envisages that participants of the programme will form an alumni community that will act as an additional source of support. This should act as a model for other banks and financial institutions to emulate in collaboration with universities as a way to nurture talent, encourage innovation, and offer support to aspiring entrepreneurs from underrepresented and low-income backgrounds across the UK. Entrepreneur Levi Roots was supportive of this recommendation, saying, quote, "There is no doubt that disparities, especially towards black and ethnic minority entrepreneurs in employment and higher education, has become that slippery, greasy pole of opportunities on which our aspiring young are now attempting to navigate. The ability to adapt and be resilient through such interventions is key to speeding up and supporting their ascension towards these aspirational goals." End quote. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, AI, systems raise complex questions of fairness. AI can be hugely beneficial, for example through speed, transparency and better decisions. However, it brings novel ways for bias to be introduced. Because these systems can be replicated at huge scale, the Commission knows that understanding and accountability in these systems are critical. From hiring to loan administration, policing, insurance pricing and more. These systems can improve or unfairly worsen the lives of the people they touch. To steward automated systems responsibly, we must acknowledge their novelty and complexity. First, we need to define fairness mathematically, so we can evaluate these systems. There are many possible definitions which fit different contexts. Our existing legal structures, such as the Equality Act, may need to be re-evaluated for the algorithmic age. Second, bias can enter the system in various ways. First, through data. For example, if a loan decision system receives data for a particular ethnic group that only contains default borrowers, the system may learn to use ethnicity data to unfairly deny loans to that group. Second, through the model. For example, unfair rules may be unknowingly hard-coded into the system. In practice, this is less common. Last, through decisions. For example, a system may give a fair output, which humans may be more confident about than is deserved. The rate of change in these systems means specific remedies are premature. Organisations and decision-makers should use tools that detect and mitigate bias before, during and after a system deployment. For example, algorithmic impact assessments are questionnaires that help raise fairness risks before a system is used. There are also now myriad technical tools that can be used to inspect data, models, and outputs for bias. The government and organisations need to stay up to date with the rapidly advancing field of fairness, accountability, and transparency in automated decision systems. Last, before dismissing any system, it should be compared with the alternative. An automated system may be imperfect, but a human system may be worse. Case study: addressing bias in hiring to let talent flourish. How could we ensure automated hiring systems hire for talent and talent only? First, we must have two hard conversations. What do we mean by talent, and what does it mean to be fair to it? Human bias is the greatest risk at this stage. Assuming definitions of talent and fairness, a big assumption, we might intervene in various ways. A hiring system trained on the data of a company's historical employees may learn biased relationships if the company has disproportionately hired one ethnicity. Therefore, the hiring analyst should think about the data collected. One could modify the model, for example, by penalising it during the learning phase if ethnicity and predicted outcome are statistically dependent, or one could modify the outputs. For example, if the model predicts different hiring outcomes for the same candidate, if only the value of ethnicity variable changes, the output is discarded and not used. These are only examples, and the reality is much more complex. However, it shows that there may be ways to trust automated systems and remove human biases to allow talent and not other characteristics to be rewarded. The Commission acknowledges that the government is currently working to advance this field in order to accelerate AI adoption and fairer outcomes. We welcome the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation's CDEI ongoing work in this space and supports the recommendations from its review into bias in algorithmic decision-making. If acted on, the recommendations will help change the behaviour of all organisations who make potentially life-changing decisions on the basis of data and algorithms. Recommendation 3. Build trust. Improve the transparency and use of artificial intelligence. The Commission supports the recommendations of the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, CDEI, and calls on the government to place a mandatory transparency obligation on all public sector organisations applying algorithms that have an impact on significant decisions affecting individuals. Ask the Equality and Human Rights Commission to issue guidance that clarifies how to apply the Equality Act to algorithmic decision-making, which should include guidance on the collection of data to measure bias and the lawfulness of bias mitigation techniques.